Okay, all right, guys. So today we're gonna take. There are two recordings in today's post. One is sort of like using class time to catch up on assignments. So that's the announcement video, which is basically like we're gonna catch up on a couple of things. Use the class time to do that. So if you're watching the rebroadcast and you're behind on some assignments, today in class we basically are going to use the time in class to catch up. So if you're watching this or you weren't able to make it to class, please take a look at your emails. I may have sent you a message specifically targeting how you can catch up, or just go ahead and take a look at the previous videos and then you'll catch up. But you'll catch up in some of the previous assignments. But today what we're going to do is that we're going to talk a little bit about the next component of the magazine project, which is called magazine conventions. And our objective or the goal today is to identify the key forms and conventions used in magazine cover designs, okay? And discuss how they communicate with a target audience. That's a fancy word basically, or a fancy way of saying that we're gonna basically understand the parts of a magazine, what they're known as, right? Some of us call them the title, the name, the articles, but they actually have certain names to them, right? So we'll briefly go over what those names are, what the vocabulary or common vocabulary is in this sort of design. And then basically what we're going to do is that we're going to create a slide, a Google slide of a magazine cover of your choice. And you're going to sort of identify what the key forms and the conventions are in that cover design. Okay. And then you'll turn that in for today. So that's going to be sort of the activity, is to identify the conventions and the forms of it. And then we'll have a brief discussion as a class in terms of like how they communicate to your audience. Okay. So that's going to be our goal for today. And I'm going to switch over to the magazine convention presentation now. So then that way we can kind of see briefly what they are. Okay. So you should be able to see this screen. And these are codes and conventions of magazine front covers, okay? So basically as we are now sort of like finishing up the user profiles or the personas, up to this point, we should have a pretty good understanding of like who's gonna read our magazine, right? What is the topic of the magazine? And we know that the design is supposed to be targeting or be visually interesting to somebody that is that specific viewer that reads it, right? So who we're saying, what we're saying, how we're saying it in the written form and graphically is going to speak to that person that you've targeted, right? So for some of you guys, it's a fashion artist. For another, it's a social media sort of entrepreneur, right? For others, it might be two different audiences: young male, older female, right? Social entrepreneur or someone of that sort. Either way, you know who you're talking to, and you know a little bit about their biography, and that's great to have because you'll know what to design for them. It's easier to design for someone or a group of people personified in a persona, so that when the time comes to make design decisions, it's not like you're not stuck, and you're not like, you're not forced to ask somebody else, right? I remember when I first started working in this field, I had no concept of personas, and so it was really hard to design in a vacuum, right? Like I just designed for myself, and at some point whether I forgot or maybe, who knows, maybe I was absent that day in the class, but the whole conversation about talking to that audience, talking to that viewer, to focus in on that persona wasn't highlighted as much because we were so focused on theory and technical skill. But at the end of the day, it's graphic design, or otherwise known or also called visual communication. And if you're talking to someone, if you're communicating, you really got to know who it is you're communicating with, right? It's not the world, because even though it goes globally, it doesn't mean that everyone's gonna see it either, if that makes sense, right? It makes more sense to know who you're specifically targeting because when you design for everything, you won't hit anything. Does that make sense? So if you design for everyone, you're not going to really talk to anyone. So because your certain colors, designs, and decisions, they all target a certain person, a certain audience. Don't get me wrong. You can start with an audience, and it can be so cool and interesting that those people you targeted tell their friends, right, about it. And if they tell their friends about it, then now you start to grow that audience. But it always starts from like a core group. And if you can talk to that core group, or they're also known as a tribe, right? Who that tribe is, who your tribe is, who the tribe that you're specifically talking to is, then it grows from there. And this does kind of tap into marketing a little bit. There's an author by the name of Seth Godin. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of Seth Godin, Godin. I'll probably have to maybe put that in one of the page, like in recommended books. But he's considered like the marketing, the leader in marketing in the internet age for the 21st century. And he says that the time of marketing to a big group of people is over, right? That doesn't work anymore because we have the internet, and the internet gives us a lot of information about specific groups of people. So now we can actually get specific groups of people, and then the idea is that rather than talk to everyone with like this big bullhorn and hope that someone hears you, it's actually better to target a small group of people and earn their trust, and then from there those people tell their friends, and it grows from there. Okay, if that makes sense, give me a little thumbs up, because that's actually like at the heart of it. At the end of the day, that's like the secret to 21st century marketing and design and outreach, right? If you can wrap that over your head, you'll do really, really well in this field, because not every graphic designer is required to take a marketing class, or not every graphic designer wants to even understand any type of business. I think it's required and necessary to understand what your employer is doing if you want to work for a studio, let's say, because then you'll have a greater understanding of what the goals are and where people are going, right? You'll have a better understanding as to why people choose or make choices in design direction or the art direction, because it comes back to who's our audience, what are we trying to say to them, and how do we communicate with them, right? And good studios take the teaching position. They'll say, okay, if you don't know, we're targeting this audience. And if you have a mentor at a studio, which is rare, but it's great if you have someone you can talk to, ask that question, like, who's our audience? Who are we targeting? And or if you want to have your own business one day, you always want to you want to take it into consideration, whether it's a magazine, a fashion line, a small business, a studio, entrepreneurship, anything under the sea, right? If you're selling bow ties, you got to know who your audience is, no matter what. And if someone ever asks you to do design work for them, then they don't even know, because chances are they probably never taken a business class or any type of marketing class before. So you have to come to them and say, who's your audience? Like, who are your followers? That's another way of wording it. Who are your followers on your social media channels? What kind of people are following you online? That's basically another way of saying who your target audience is. Okay, so that's just the background of that, and that's why the user persona is so important. Okay, so just wanted to kind of backtrack that a little bit so that everyone kind of is on the same page. It's really important to know who your audience is and how that's all targeting from there. Okay. So now, once we know who we're targeting, because I know because you guys turned in your user profiles, we can now move on to our codes and conventions of a magazine front cover. Okay. Now, at the end of the day, this is pretty much vocabulary, and it will be a short lesson. But ultimately, there are different parts to a magazine publication. Okay. And they're the same online versus in the physical form. Okay. One of the main things we talk about is sort of like the central image. It's known as the main image or central image, the image that's in the center of it all. That will always be your main image, right? And we kind of know this, naturally, right? We've seen so many different publications of magazines out there that typically there's always like an image that is sort of like your central image, the big picture, right? Literally the big picture, or collage or whatever the design may be. And that central image is pretty much the main article, right? Or typically the main article. It's a photograph, it's a Photoshop collage. It is some type of image that's been modified or not modified. It could be a raw photograph that's just well taken, right? But usually it's in some type of close-up, full body, or mid shot, which goes back to the 70 years profile. And because I also know you guys finished it and turned it in, you saw that within the last 80 plus years, the design hasn't changed, right? Full shot, half body, full body, like it's almost a century's worth of publications in our society, and the format has not changed. And the 70 years exercise was really to kind of run that idea home. It's like it's not what the teacher says. Like history shows us in the research that this stuff really has been the same or similar throughout the decades. In some decades it changes, as you saw, colors, who the content, the articles, who's in the photograph, but that's all culture, right? And the culture determines what that content is, but how it's shown is almost the same. Okay, if that makes sense, give me a little thumbs up emoji. And if you agree with me, that's great, because that's kind of how it's all flowing. Okay, so the 70 years exercise is proof, you guys saw it based on your research, is proof that this stuff holds for long term, right? Almost a century. Okay. So yes, the central image is always the first part of that of your magazine. And it could be, like I said, a Photoshop collage. It could be a photograph that's well taken. It could be a photo that's been edited in Photoshop with image adjustments or effects. You get to decide for your project how you want to manipulate the image, but there's always going to be an image on the cover. It could be art too. So if you have your own drawings, your illustrations, your designs, it's great. It's a central image of some sort that communicates that message. Okay, so we have that. After that central image, so the first thing we see is that central image typically, as we saw in our principles of design exercises last week. The next thing we see typically, the second thing we notice, is the title of the magazine, also known as the masthead. Okay, so title, masthead, one and the same. Okay, that is going to be obviously the name of your magazine, but it typically has like a cool font, a unique font. Sometimes you design the font and the lettering for those folks that took like typography. Most of the time you will probably see it's a font that's been modified in a unique way. Sometimes designers are more like, we can't really we can pull a font, or we're too busy to create a new lettering system, but maybe we can actually do something of a logo where we actually take a font and modify the lettering to kind of communicate the message. So in the center of this image in my presentation where it says groupie, like you can see in that O that's in there, that's been modified, right? So you could do that in your project if you wish to. You could take a lettering or a letter and add and modify it and make an adjustment and customize it to the project. And so now it becomes a unique project in graphic design. And most of the time in graphic design, you don't see too many students make modifications to lettering because the typography is either not communicated or not highlighted or not as valued, but it really should be super valued. And so, even an edit could be, I don't want to make it seem like, oh, I have to add something to the letter or remove something. It could also be the spacing in between the letters, right? Or a combination of the title versus the word magazine, like it could contrast that way. So when we go into typography and as a class, we'll kind of tap into that world of type, but lettering is its own sort of like world. And so we can do interesting things with the font to do that. So yeah, we can make those modifications. Magazines are typically 1 or 2 words, so never 3 or 4. Okay, so groupie magazine, Vogue, right? Best Life, Total Film, 2 words, never really 3. Once in a while, maybe Total Film Magazine might be the third word, but in the end, it's known as Total World or Total Film or Groupie, okay? So that's just the main idea. So usually 1 or 2 words is the name of the magazine, and it's normally on the upper third, like top third section of the magazine, right? So sometimes it could be a little bit over a third, maybe half or 40% of the page. It depends, but normally it positions itself outside of the competition, meaning it's different from other letterings and other magazines that are out there. Okay, so the masthead is there, and you will always find the price, the issue number, which is normally a barcode, the date and the title, or date by title, and then the font sizes and things of that sort. So you will always find that within the magazine. Okay. Okay, that's there. Okay, almost done. Oh, I was annotating. There we go. Then we have other things that kind of surround the magazine, right? Which things typically that we notice, but or don't pay too much attention to. Things like a barcode. So in your magazine, we will also add a barcode towards the end, and I'll kind of guide you through that process. And those are obviously to scan and to make purchases and things like that. It's a little different now that we're moving into the world of digital publication. So with digital publication, barcodes may not be necessary, but I think for the purposes of this exercise, I think we'll add the barcode just so that we know, what the typical scale is and things of that sort, so that we at least have some understanding of it as a class. But I think in a professional level, probably not as much, but it's good to know at least like barcodes and sizes and things like that, and how to scale it accordingly onto your page. I think that's a small piece of information that should be valuable to know. Okay. And positioning wise, barcodes can either be on the bottom left, bottom right, or even on the back side. Sometimes barcodes are sort of tacked on with issue dates, or the issue number and or dates. So they could be there too, or websites. So there's flexibility in like where the information goes. It just depends again on your audience and if they're going to need to know that information more than another audience, right? So if you're targeting a business person or a social media person, or an entrepreneur, are they going to care more about the issue number, or are they on the go so much that all they want to know is what's on the cover, what's the information, and getting to the page, right? That's going to make good decisions. It's going to help you make a good decision on where to put things based on, well, what will your reader actually appreciate more, or what is your reader care about more in your situation? Okay, so that's kind of the idea. Then there's other things like buzzwords, free, exclusive, plus. We'll always see that somewhere, and we'll see that in a moment in the articles. And then something called a puff, which is sort of like offers or giveaways. Not necessary. Sometimes it kind of comes out to some capacity, but you will always see that at some level there, and we'll show you a quick example of that in just a moment. Okay. Cover lines is basically the official word for articles, right? So where we say articles, right? Oh, this is the name of the article that's in the publication. In the publication world, it's actually known as a cover line. So the cover line, or the line or the title of the magazine that's on the cover. That's kind of where it is. There are lines of text on the cover designed to attract the audience attention. So, it can be an article name, but typically it's more than an article. It's kind of like like an article name or a sneak peek. It's basically designed to get them to want to look inside the magazine, if that makes sense. So, article titles are, most of the time, the name of an article is designed to kind of like inform us when it's on the cover of a publication. They have to be both informative, but also interesting, if that makes sense, right? And that goes back to knowing your audience. What are they going to want to read that they care about, right? So we'll take a look at that in just a moment. But if they're into something, then typically it's like short, sweet, and interesting, right? Or short, sweet, and like interesting title to the cover, to the article. Okay. Then we have the main cover line, which is just, again, another fancy vocabulary word for the article or the main article related to the picture. So if you have a photograph of a, of a celebrity, right, then your main cover line, your main article is related to that main image, right? So if we saw a, celebrity on the cover, then your main cover line is related to that picture, because people are going to see, oh, I see a famous person. That's the focal point. And then the next thing they're going to wonder is whoa, what do you want me to know about this focal point? So if it's a focal point about, with a celebrity on it, then obviously the main cover line, or the main article, as it's also called, is basically going to be related to that picture. Okay. So typically it could be 1 or 2 words, and you'll always find like sub articles or sublines underneath that, which kind of giving you a taste of what's inside that cover, right? So what am I expected? What am I going to see? It's designed to get me interested, get me intrigued, so that I can jump in, click onto that publication, and start reading it. Okay. All right, almost there. Okay, and then we have other things, of course, such as the strips. When we saw the time life, video that went through all the covers, you saw that, every now and again, there was like a horizontal strip, or this black strip on the top or on the bottom, or sometimes a different color, where it has like additional articles or additional features about the publication, right? And is more about the stories, and it's sort of like something that gives more value to the reader, to your audience, right? So going back to the social media entrepreneur, then those strips will basically have additional things like plus read more about ways to engage your audience, right? They're just little sort of lines of information or lists or titles that kind of conveys more interesting stories, or a full understanding of what they're going to experience in that cover, depending, okay, or in that magazine. Of course, color is going to be used in this as well. So when we talk about color, a color palette is key, right? So we'll talk about dominating colors, but most of the time it's good to know what is the color scheme of your photo, or of your magazine, I should say. I like to take color sometimes from the photos, or make a decision on what colors I want to use, and go into Photoshop and change the images to those colors, if that makes sense. So there's a couple of ways we can approach that, but basically, whatever your image is, whatever your theme is for your magazine, having an understanding of color and knowing what is the color scheme or color ways is going to be helpful. So like on the image here on the bottom left, we see Captain America. Obviously, that is going to be the main central image is, the actor dressed as Captain America, but the designer went ahead and added additional images or imagery to reinforce red, white, and blue like a flag, right? But that's very photoshopped, right? In the Vogue cover, obviously, the text is what's giving the color away. So we see, this actress, Meryl Streep, obviously she has, the photo or the colors of the photo appear to be more blues and natural tones. So the designer added a complementary color or contrasting color to those blues in the photo and to those grays, sort of like a magenta sort of color to kind of work with that, right? So we have that happening. Eminem, obviously, if we take away the text there, he's black on a white background. So what colors contrast well with black? Well, they went with red, right? This designer went with a red. And obviously you can make some assumptions as to why, red is a good contrast to black. Red symbolizes fire, strength, energy, right? Anger, intensity in the Western culture and Western world, or in American culture. And so they went with that color. So typically those colors have meaning behind it. And so we want to also think about a little bit about what those colors are for you. Okay. So what we're going to do for today is that we're basically going to select a cover of your choice, right? So you get to have a little bit of fun with it. You get to select a cover that you find interesting. And then what you're going to do is, like I say, you're going to identify the key forms and conventions in that cover design, okay? So here we see some additional samples, and I'll definitely give this to you, and we'll build one together as a class. So we'll do that live on the video. We'll go to Google Slides and we'll build one, and I'll share that with you guys too. But basically, you're going to create a slide just like this that you see on screen, and you pick your cover. It could be any cover of your choice, hopefully something related to your theme or your topic, and it looks interesting to you, and you find it cool and interesting, right? Not just some random one, but you like it. And what we're going to do here is that we're basically going to take that image and we're going to break it down. We're going to ask ourselves, oh, well, masthead, right? Oh, okay, which is found in number 1. Oh, okay, where is the central image that's happening here? Okay, that's this central image right there, right? Oh, okay. Then we start to see other things like, is there a secondary lead or a kicker or a cover line? So number 3 is the cover line. And those are the articles, right? And typically those are the names of the articles that you find in the cover line. So most of the time, what you're gonna notice is that there's always gonna be a central image, right? Which is number 10 on the right. You're going to obviously have the masthead, which is the title of the magazine. That's a for sure. And you're always gonna see other articles that are related to that, right? And so the main article or the main article related to the image is typically going to be like your sort of like your headline or your mass article, as it were, right? Or your like central article. Those are different names for different situations there. Or it could be the headline, right? The line of or the title that is the main head of that magazine cover. And then we have the cover lines, like I said, which are the other articles that are also in the magazine. So where the red is, you'll typically find those more so than anything. Now, going into other things, so I'll use kind of like, I'll use like a green to kind of communicate that. The other things that we'll typically see in there after like the central image, right? The headline, the cover lines, the mastheads, which is basically the main photo, the title, right? The main article, the second articles or the other articles that are separate to the main article. Obviously, we're going to see things, if it's an older thing, like a barcode or a date line, an issue line, which is basically the issue and the date. So you'll see that afterwards in most of your articles there, typically, okay, for sure. And then you'll probably see a couple other things that may or may not be on your cover. So these are things that you probably won't see often on your cover, and I'll use like orange to represent that. Okay, depends on your magazine, right? Selling line or banners that are here in orange, okay, and the red orange arrow might not be there, right? Not every magazine is going to have a selling line or a banner at the top. Maybe yours does, but if you do, that's a banner. That's a selling line, okay? Sometimes it might even have a little shape behind it, but it's a banner, it's a selling line. Why? Well, think about banners. Typically they're high and they're high up and they're trying to sell something, right? So in this soccer magazine, it's basically, special issue, foreigner special issue. So that's the selling line or banner. Why should I buy this? Oh, it's a special issue, okay? It wouldn't be a banner if it was below, because it's not being communicated in the most important way. So that's normally at the top, something special as a selling banner. Sometimes it has a line or shape behind it. Sometimes they even are at a diagonal too, like we saw in some of the Time magazine covers in the videos that we've seen. So sometimes it could be even at an angle as well, okay? So it may or may not be there in orange is what I'm trying to say, okay? The other thing that may or may not be there is an anchorage, right? Which is, again, another fancy word for subtext or subline. So an anchorage is something that's sort of like, I have my main title, my main article, right? And then, which is like the headliner, and then underneath that, there's like 2 lines or maybe 3 lines, mostly 2 lines of text that talks a little bit more about it. So this is a cover with a soccer player named Van Persie. Hey, he's fit, lethal, and scoring and fun. So why the long face? That's an anchor. So think about it as like they're trying to anchor the article, anchor the idea, give you a little bit more about what's happening. They're trying to anchor it to the viewer and let them know what it's more about. Okay, so think of anchorage as like a subtext showing you more about what you're about to read. Okay, so that's anchorage. Okay, it's anchoring a little bit more information from that cover. Okay, on it there. And sometimes you'll even see that in the articles or the cover lines of secondary articles or in your cover or of choice. Okay. Other things we might not see are a graphic puff or feature. So graphic feature or puff, we mentioned that. And those puffs are typically could be a shape, right? They could be geometric, they could be organic shapes, but they're not always there. They may or may not be there depending, right? I think I've seen more graphic features or puffs in like beauty magazines typically, that are trying to promote like an event or promote a product or promote a celebrity article of some sort. So it's like a feature or puff. And so normally it's there. It's kind of like a pimple and it's there to kind of puff up, stand out, and give you a little bit of a highlight. It's kind of like a text message where it's like, hey, guess what? The little notification. So I think of it as kind of like a notification of something that's happening in that article that they may want you to know, but not be all up in the main idea behind it. So just a little bonus of notification of some sort that's going to be inside the publication, right? So we have that. So every now and again you might see that. Again, it may be in some, it may not be in others. Okay. Then we have captions, which those captions are typically like anchorages, but the captions are pretty much just small little captions about additional pieces of information in there. So it might be linked to a cover line. It might not even be linked to a cover line at all. It might just be like this small line of text that's kind of giving you something there, which is like the caption of something. It depends, but it could be, it could not be there. So I don't see captions too often. I'll probably, if I do, it'll probably be with like those secondary articles, those sublines included into that. Okay. Okay. So we typically have that happening in there. Okay. And then of course, secondary leads and kickers, probably won't see much of those happening. Kickers are kind of like, oh, here's the kicker. Here's something that you might want to know. That's interesting. Kickers and cover lines, kind of the same thing, I would say. What's the difference? Normally they say things like best and worst, or hot new, or like, here's the kicker, here's something that you're gonna love, plus this new thing, or tips from social media influencers, or the best tips from the most followers, or the most famous artist gives secret tips. Those are like kickers, right? They're designed they're like cover lines, they're cover lines, but they're also designed to kind of kick it in the way. So I guess 2 and 3 are kind of the same thing depending on what's written. And then of course flashes are kind of like puffs, but smaller, and they're more like plus, bonus, in addition, and I don't see those too often either, but they're there just in case. And then menu strips are also occasional. Again, not every magazine has them, but if you do see something at the bottom with a shape behind it typically, then that is a menu strip, right? And it's just telling you some additional things that's inside of that publication. So as we're designing this, it's one part of this project is going to be graphic, and yes, but for this exercise, what the name of that part of it is actually going to be more about what's written and how it's kind of related to the picture. So it's more content related and it's more contextual, if that makes sense, than anything else. So as you're doing your cover and you're kind of wondering like, oh, I see it, but I'm not sure, then that means you have to read it and and think about it from the designer standpoint. Oh, what are they trying to say to the viewer? Oh, they're trying to get them to like get all interested in it or sell them something. So that's probably a graphic puff. Oh, they want them to like see the best and the worst. Okay, so that if this magazine is about this and they're trying to push this exciting thing, that's probably a kicker and a cover line, right? they're saying a little bit more about the central image or the main photo of the article. Based on what I read here, it's related to the two, but it says something more like related to it or gives you more information about it. That's probably an anchorage. So you have to read it to understand it and make sense out of it and contextualize it. And that's the idea. You know, we want you to be able to kind of analyze and think about it from the designer talking to the viewer's point of view. Okay, does that make sense, guys? If it does, you can give me a little thumbs up emoji. But this exercise is really about like it's kind of like 70% visual slash like 30% visual, 70% contextual. So you got to read it. You got to go. You got to definitely have to read those articles and kind of make sense of like what the designer's trying to say to the viewer. And that's the whole purpose of it. Okay, and that's the reason why I moved the rest of the class to finish the other exercises, because if the class is doing this without doing the last exercises, it's not going to make sense. So because they don't know, or they haven't identified their audience, or they haven't identified the 70 years. So these exercises, one adds to the other. They kind of build on top of each other, which is why we're doing that pause and we're having everybody work on it. Okay. So thank you guys for being on top of it, catching up, and now you're starting to understand there is a relationship between the two. Okay, or the three exercises now. Okay, so let's go ahead and get practical. How are we going to build this? Let's go ahead and set this up. I'm gonna set it up step by step, and then we will piece this together for you. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to switch over and open up my browser to Google Slides. So I'm going to open up my Google browser. Okay, and move this out of the way. And in my browser, we're basically going to go to Google Slides or slides.google.com or Google Drive, slides.google.com. Oops, just typed it. Let's go to our Drive. Or you can go to Drive to set it up. And then from here, on the upper left-hand side, I'm going to go to New. And we're going to create a new Google slide. So, all right, there we go. Like that. Here we go. Okay, I'm going to go to a blank slide. I'm going to start a new presentation on the upper left-hand side there. Okay, and basically you can set up your own format, you can set up your own template. It's totally up to you, but we'll just call this magazine conventions. Okay, we'll enter your name on the bottom there. Okay, and let's take a look here. And in this one, I'm just going to, just for the sake of this presentation, I'm just going to add the objective. So then that way there's no confusion. So the objective is to identify the key forms and conventions used in magazine cover design and discuss how they communicate with the target audience. So that's the objective. And then from here, I'm just going to create a new blank slide. Okay. And in that blank slide, I can now start to look for a cover. Okay. You get to pick your cover of your choice, right? So, if I do a sports magazine, we'll just do sports magazine as an example here. I can go to Google search or Google Images and do a search for like a magazine, sports magazine. It could be business magazine. You get to pick the whatever the topic is. If you're doing fashion, that could be fashion related from there. And I'm just going to basically pick it. And maybe if I just want to be a little bit more relevant, maybe I'll add the year 2021 or the current year, so I can see a little bit more of the current magazines and kind of make some decisions from there and see what the details are, things of that sort. So what could be the cover of choice? We'll see, add that in there. Yeah. Maybe we'll go entertainment. Okay. And from here, I can basically click, hold, drag it into my presentation, or I can right click on my mouse and copy that image and then go to edit menu, paste, or right click, paste the image, and put it into my slide here, okay? And you can either center it on the page, go off center, but centering is probably better since we're gonna have different locations and whatnot for your file. But here's my cover and it's set, okay? Which is pretty interesting here, okay? So now I'm gonna go and select the arrow. So on my menu, there's a series of tools. Typically, it starts off with like a little sort of line with two circles linked at the end. I'm going to select a line. I'll call that my arrow. And basically from here, I'm just going to start creating my arrow. And if I want to change the color, I can. If I want to change the size, I can. If I want to change the thickness, I can. But we'll just select and leave it at black. And then from here, I'm going to use my type tool. And from the type tool, we're going to sort of click a text box and reduce the size because I don't want it to be too big. And font sizes, probably a 12 or 11 point might work. But based on my slide, I know that I'm going to see the masthead here and identify that as the masthead. Okay. Maybe make it a little bold, maybe a little bigger, maybe move it a little bit closer to the line there, okay? Okay, now I will give this to you, okay? I'll set you guys up with this. As a matter of fact, what I'll do for being ahead is that I'm gonna give this template to you as a copy to save you guys a little bit of time, okay? And then I'm gonna also add a sort of like a reference slide so that you can use the reference slide in your exercise here. So you'll have this for reference, okay? So you can always look at slide number 3 as a reference slide, and then you can go to your 4th slide and start adding it on there, okay? So obviously there's different things like mastheads, cover lines, central images, right? Definitely we see selling line or banner on the top. We see anchorages appears to be there, and some subtext there. So for some covers, there might be 10 things, and for others, it might be 15 or 20. I would say try to find a magazine that's related to your topic, so that way you can see what conventions typically happen for your field. So if you're going to do a fashion magazine, do a fashion magazine for your analysis. If you're going to do graphic design or business related, use business articles or magazines of your choice, right? And just try to relate it to your topic so that you can see what's happening and you can break it down and analyze it, okay? This is additional research we do as designers. Before we go into a project, we kind of see what other things are happening in the design world. And we do like a little bit of a principles of design analysis on it. I do principles of design on the covers as well. But now what we're doing is we're actually analyzing the parts of the cover, the content specifically, the writing, and we're analyzing the writing itself. So this graphic design thing is also a contextual reading thing as much as it is a critical thinking thing, as much as it is a visual thing, okay? So now we're thinking here, right? And this is what makes us good designers, is we're critically thinking about. Okay, so I'm gonna call this the magazine conventions. I'm gonna say make a copy, magazine conventions there. Okay, and then from here, what we're gonna do, okay, is I'm gonna give this copy to you so you can make a copy. Okay, I'm gonna copy that link, change it to anyone, so then that way you guys have your own version of it. Anyone with the link? Obviously, I'll post it up as well. So, and of course, you definitely want to be on in your Google file so you can make that copy. But here it is for you, ladies. And so feel free to make a copy of that, and you can start adding your cover and then labeling the parts of your cover. Okay. So I'll post this up obviously momentarily. We'll talk to the class, get them going and set. Obviously, I'll post up this video too. So today it's going to be a very light sort of day on labeling the parts of the cover, but it's part of the research, and it's going to be helpful when we start designing tomorrow. So we're actually going to start jumping in now that we know what we want, what the parts of the magazine are, and how we're going to go. Okay. If you have any questions or issues, type it in the chat, or you can ask. There we go. And then we'll go from there. Okay. That being said, is there any questions, issues, concerns, anything that you might have that you want to know? Feel free to unmute your mic, type it in, or you can type it in the chat there. Okay. All right. Okay. So we're all on the same page. If we are, thumbs up emoji. Everyone knows exactly what is expected, what we're going to do, and how we're going to do it. Cool. All right. Wonderful. Okay, this is great. So this will be magazine conventions. We'll go ahead and we'll pause it. So we'll make this due at the end of the week, last thing I'll say, and then I'll stop video, and then I'll have some further instructions for everyone from there, okay? All right, guys, enjoy, and we will see you in the next lesson.